Imagine being trapped inside a cramped steel furnace. To the Germans, it was a Ronson, a lighter that burns on the first strike. To the Americans, it was the M4 Sherman, their trusty but vulnerable workhorse. In the chaos of World War II, the average life expectancy of a frontline tank was measured in days, sometimes hours. Metal twisted, shells pierced armor like paper, and crews often didn't make it out alive. But amidst the smoke of Normandy and the ruins of Germany, one legend rose above the carnage. A single tank that defied every law of probability. They called it Bomb. It wasn't just a machine, it was a ghost in the fog of war. While thousands of its brothers lay charred in the fields of France, this Sherman kept rolling, surviving 4,000 miles of pure hell without a single scratch on its soul. This is the unbelievable true story of the luckiest tank in history. Our story begins in the muddy training grounds of England, 1944. The Sherbrooke Fusiliers Regiment, a Canadian armored unit, received their brand new M4A2 Sherman. To the brass, it was just serial number 30606. To the 5 men inside, it was their only hope for survival. Following the regiment's tradition of naming tanks starting with B, they painted a single word on its hull: Bomb. Led by Sergeant Harold Futter, the crew knew the odds were stacked against them. The Sherman was fast and reliable, but its 75mm guns struggled against German Panthers, and its armor was no match for the dreaded 88mm flak guns. Most crews expected to be in a replacement vehicle within a month. Little did they know, Bomb would become the only tank in the entire regiment to see the beginning of the invasion and the final surrender of the Nazi regime without ever being knocked out of action. June 6, 1944, Juno Beach. The ramps of the landing crafts dropped, and the world turned into a symphony of screaming lead and exploding salt water. Bomb roared to life, its tracks gripping the shifting sands of France. This was the moment where most stories ended before they began. Mines were hidden under the surf, and anti-tank guns were zeroed in on every square inch of the beachhead. As Bomb crawled out of the surf, shells whistled past its turret, missing by mere inches. The crew could hear the frantic heartbeat of the engine over the thunder of the Atlantic wall. They bypassed burning wrecks and shattered bunkers, pushing inland through the dust and blood. By the end of D-Day, the Sherbrooke Fusiliers had suffered heavy losses, but Bomb stood tall, its green paint caked in salt and sand, but its hull intact. The miracle had officially started. After the beaches came the bocage, a nightmare landscape of ancient, thick hedgerows that turned Normandy into a deadly maze. This was Tiger Country. Behind every bush, a German Panzer could be lurking, ready to send a high-velocity shell through the Sherman's thin side armor. The fighting was claustrophobic and terrifying. In the battle for Cone, Bomb found itself in the middle of a brutal grind. The crew watched as their comrades' tanks erupted into pillars of fire. The Tommy Cooker reputation of the Sherman was being proven every single day, yet somehow, Bomb always found the gap. Whether it was a mistimed German shot or a split-second decision by Sergeant Futter to veer left instead of right, the tank seemed to have an invisible shield. The crew began to whisper. They stopped calling it luck. They started calling it the charm. They were the lucky ones in a graveyard of iron. By August 44, the fields of Normandy had turned into a massive graveyard. The Allied forces had finally cracked the German lines, trapping the remnants of the Wehrmacht in what would be known as the Falaise Pocket. Bomb was at the tip of the spear. The mission was simple but suicidal. Close the gap and stop the elite SS Panzer divisions from escaping. The air was thick with the stench of burning rubber and decaying armor. As Bomb maneuvered through the narrow corridors of the pocket, the crew witnessed a scene of absolute carnage. Thousands of German vehicles were being pulverized by Allied artillery and typhoons, but the Germans weren't going down without a fight. From the tree lines, hidden Panzerschreck teams fired rockets that could melt through steel like butter. One of these projectiles hissed so close to Bomb's commander that he felt the heat on his face. Yet the tank rolled on, unscathed, as if the shadows themselves were protecting it. The crew of Bomb began to develop a strange ritual. They treated their machine not as a tool, but as a living member of the family. Driver Walter White, gunner Bill Sherrick, and the rest of the team realized that their survival was defying every statistical model of the War Department. In the Sherbrooke Fusiliers, tanks were being replaced at an alarming rate. Some crews were on their third or fourth Sherman by the time they reached the Seine River, but the serial number 30606 remained constant. During one engagement near a bombed-out village, a German 88mm shell, the most feared weapon of the war, struck a stone wall just inches above the bomb's turret. The debris showered the tank, but the hull remained unpierced. The men inside shared a silent look of disbelief. They were operating in the dead zone, where a single mistake meant a fiery end, yet Bomb seemed to dance between the raindrops of a steel storm.
As the autumn of 1944 moved in, the Allied juggernaut moved into Belgium and the Netherlands. The terrain changed from the dense hedgerows of France to open, flat polders and narrow dikes. This was a tank commander's nightmare. A Sherman on a dike was a perfect silhouette against the sky, a sitting duck for any hidden anti-tank gun. During the push toward the Scheldt, Bomb faced a new enemy, the mud. Thousands of vehicles got bogged down, becoming easy targets for the retreating Germans. But Bomb had a peculiar mechanical grace. While other Shermans threw their tracks or burned out their transmissions in the thick clay, Bomb's engine hummed with strange reliability. It was as if the machine knew that stopping meant dying. The crew pushed through the freezing rain, clearing path after path for the infantry, becoming a symbol of hope for the Canadian soldiers who followed in their tracks. December 1944 brought the coldest winter in decades and Hitler's last desperate gamble, the Battle of the Bulge. The Bomb and its crew found themselves holding the line in brutal conditions. The oil in the engines thickened like molasses, and the steel of the tank became painfully cold to the touch. In the Ardennes forest, visibility was often zero due to the heavy fog and snow. One morning, Bomb rounded a corner and found itself face to face with a German patrol. The engagement was instantaneous. Traces lit up the white forest in a deadly disco of red and green. A German anti-tank grenade bounced off Bomb's front glasses plate, failing to detonate. It was a dud, the ultimate sign that luck was still on their side. They returned fire, their 75mm gun barking into the mist, clearing the way once again. The unbeatable German winter offensive was breaking against the iron will of crews like those of the Bomb. By early 1945, the Nazi Reich was crumbling, but the most dangerous obstacle remained, the Rhine River. This was the heart of Germany, protected by the remnants of the most fanatical units. Bomb was now a veteran of hundreds of days of combat. Its paint was scarred, its fenders were crumpled, and its hull was covered in the souvenirs of war, but it had never been coated, army speak for being knocked out. Crossing into German soil felt different. The resistance was desperate. Snipers and Volkssturm units with Panzerfausts were hiding in every cellar. As Bomb rolled into the town of Deventer, a hidden anti-tank gun opened fire from a church square. The shell whistled past the turret's loader's head by a fraction of an inch. Bomb swung its turret around and silenced the position with a single decisive shot. They were now deep in enemy territory, and the charm was being tested like never before.
Spring 1945. The war was in its death throes. Bomb and the Sherbrooke Fusiliers were now part of the massive Allied push across Germany. The fighting was still fierce, but different. Organized resistance gave way to desperate pockets, often manned by fanatic SS units or young boys of the Hitler Youth armed with anti-tank weapons. The roads were clogged with refugees, displaced persons, and retreating German soldiers. This chaotic landscape presented new dangers. Bomb had to navigate through deserted towns, avoiding booby traps and desperate ambushes. During one such advance through a deserted town, a German sniper took aim at the commander's hatch. The bullet ricocheted off the hardened steel, sending sparks flying but leaving the crewmen unharmed. Bomb continued its relentless advance, a symbol of unwavering resilience in a world collapsing around it. Each mile gained was a testament to its improbable survival. Even in the final weeks, Bomb faced the most dangerous adversaries. Near the Elbe River, the Sherbrooke Fusiliers encountered elements of the dreaded 12th SS Panzer Division, Hitlerjugend, young but fanatically loyal soldiers. These were desperate men, fighting for a lost cause, often to the last bullet. In a tense standoff in a small German village, Bomb found itself exchanging fire with a Jagdpanther, a powerful German tank destroyer. The Jagdpanther's long 88mm gun was superior to the Sherman 75. It was a duel of titans, a test of pure nerve. The Jagdpanther fired, its shell striking a nearby building, showering Bomb with bricks and dust. Sergeant Futter, with nerves of steel, ordered a precise return fire. The Jagdpanther, damaged and outmaneuvered, retreated. Bomb had once again stared death in the face and emerged victorious, its hull still gleaming under the grime of battle. As the Allies pushed deeper, the signs of German collapse became undeniable. Towns surrendered without a fight. White flags hung from windows, and columns of exhausted German prisoners marched silently towards captivity. Bomb was often at the front, leading the way. Its presence had become a morale booster for the infantry. They saw it as an omen of good fortune, a tangible sign that victory was within reach. The tank had become more than just a fighting machine. It was a psychological weapon. For the Canadians, it was a familiar, comforting sight, its distinct name on the hull a beacon of hope. For the Germans, it was a ghost, a tank that should have been destroyed a dozen times over, yet kept coming, a testament to the inexorable advance of the Allied forces. The war was winding down, but the crew of Bomb knew that the final days could be the most dangerous.
May 8th, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. The guns fell silent. After nearly 11 months of continuous combat, after traveling thousands of miles from the beaches of Normandy to the heart of Germany, Bomb stood triumphantly. It had participated in every major engagement of the Canadian advance, from D-Day to the liberation of the Netherlands and the final push across the German plains. It had fired thousands of rounds, survived countless near misses, and watched as hundreds of its sister tanks were destroyed around it. The crew, battered but unbroken, emerged from their steel cocoon, not just alive, but with their tank, the legend, intact. There wasn't a single battle scar that had penetrated its armor. Not one. It was an unprecedented achievement, a miracle of steel and spirit. This humble M4 Sherman, serial number 30606, had truly earned its name, Bomb. Not because it exploded, but because it dropped on the enemy and kept coming back. What happens to a legendary tank after the war? Most were scrapped, melted down, or sold off, but Bomb was different. Its unique combat record earned it a special place. After a well-deserved rest, Bomb was shipped back to Canada. It underwent some minor refurbishment, but its battle-hardened hull was left untouched, a testament to its incredible journey. Today, Bomb stands proudly as a monument, a silent sentinel in the Canadian War Museum in Ottawa. It bears the scars of 1,000 close calls, the faded paint telling stories of heroism and unimaginable luck. It serves as a reminder of the courage of its crews, Sergeant Harold Futter, Walter White, Bill Sherrick, and many others who, against all odds, brought their charmed tank through the greatest conflict in human history. It's not just a tank, it's a testament to hope, resilience, and the sheer audacity of survival. Inside the Bomb, space was a luxury they didn't have. 5 men lived, ate, and slept within a few cubic meters of oil-scented air. Sergeant Harold Futter, the commander, was the eyes of the machine. He spent hours standing in the hatch, exposed to shrapnel, just to give his crew a chance to see the enemy first. Then there was Walter White, the driver, whose hands on the steering levers became an extension of the tank's soul. He developed a sixth sense for the terrain, knowing exactly which patch of mud would swallow them and which ridge offered the best deflection. Bill Sherrick was the gunner. His world was the narrow view of the periscope, waiting for the flash of a muzzle to return fire. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were a single organism. In the quiet nights in France, they whispered to the hull, thanking the steel for holding firm. They knew that if one link in their chain broke, the charm of the bomb would vanish forever.
If there was one sound that haunted the dreams of the crew, it was the crack boom of the German 88mm flak gun. It was a weapon designed to swat planes out of the sky, repurposed to shred tanks at distances over 2 kilometers. One afternoon, while clearing a path near the French town of Putange, the bomb felt the literal wind of death. An 88mm shell, traveling at supersonic speeds, passed so close to the turret that the vacuum of its passage sucked the mass right out of Footer's hand. A split-second difference in their speed, a slight bump in the road, and the bomb would have been decapitated. The crew sat in stunned silence for a heartbeat as the shell obliterated a stone farmhouse 500 yards behind them. White didn't wait for an order. He slammed the gears into reverse, dancing the 12-ton beast out of the kill zone while Sherrick traversed the turret to find the source of the nightmare. Luck is often built on the hard work. While other tanks broke down due to neglected engines or worn-out tracks, the crew of the bomb treated maintenance like a religious ritual. Every time the column halted, even under sporadic mortar fire, they were out with grease guns and wrenches. They listened to the rhythmic clatter of the tracks like a doctor listens to a heartbeat. If a bolt was loose, they felt it through the floorboards. The M4A2's twin diesel engines were reliable, but the crew's obsession made them immortal. They scavenged spare parts from donor tanks, Shermans that hadn't been as lucky as theirs. They reinforced the bomb's floor with extra sandbags to protect against mines and welded scrap metal to the sides as improvised spaced armor. They were building their own fortress, bit by bit, refusing to let mechanical failure do what the Germans couldn't, stop the bomb. The city of Caen was a twisted labyrinth of gray rubble and hidden death. For weeks, the Allies were stalled by a defense so fierce it seemed supernatural. The bomb was ordered into the ruins to flush out snipers and Panzerfaust teams. In these tight streets, the Sherman's greatest weakness, its height, made it a massive target. From the upper floors of half-collapsed buildings, German soldiers could look directly down onto the thin top armor of the tank. As they turned a corner near the cathedral, a teenage soldier emerged from a cellar, aiming a shaped-charge rocket at the bomb's side. The crew saw him too late, but as the boy pulled the trigger, the rubble beneath him shifted, sending his shot wild. The rocket slammed into a downed lamppost inches from the tracks. It was another bomb miracle. They didn't celebrate, they simply reacted, the coaxial machine gun clearing the way as they pushed deeper into the smoke. The Germans called the Sherman the Ronson, or the Tommy Cooker, because they believed it burned every time it was hit. This was largely due to dry storage of ammunition. But the bomb's crew was smarter. They had heard the rumors and seen the pyres of their friends. They began wetting their storage, keeping their shells in specialized racks, and they never carried more than the strictly necessary rounds. They saw the bomb not as a flammable trap, but as a survivor. During a skirmish near the Orne River, they watched a sister tank go up in a roar of white-hot magnesium fire after a single hit. The psychological toll was immense. Every time a bullet sparked off their armor, they waited for the flash of fire that would consume them. But it never came. The bomb remained cool, its ventilation fans humming, its interior a sanctuary of grease and grit amidst a world of fire. Night in the front lines was never truly silent. For the crew of the bomb, the darkness was a double-edged sword. While the tank was hidden, it was also blind. They took turns on watch, standing in the turret with their heads exposed to the freezing rain of the European autumn. Every snap of a twig or distant rumble of a motor felt like a German tiger creeping through the shadows. The interior of the tank, usually a cacophony of engine roars and radio static, became a tomb-like space, where the drip of condensation sounded like a hammer blow. They slept in snatches, their boots never leaving their feet, their hands always inches from their sidearms. In the dead of night, near Falaise, a German patrol passed so close they could hear the soldiers whispering in German. The bomb sat like a dark, silent mountain of steel. The enemy never noticed the beast breathing in the dark, and the charm held once more. Bomb rolled into liberated French villages. The horror of war briefly vanished. The crew was met with a sea of tricolor flags and cheering civilians. People who had lived under the Nazi boot for 4 years threw flowers onto the scarred glacis plate of the Sherman. Bottles of hidden wine and crusts of bread were passed up to the dusty, exhausted men. It was a surreal contrast. 1 hour they were dodging 88mm shells. The next they were being kissed by grandmothers and children. But Sergeant Futter knew the danger of complacency. Amidst the celebration, a sniper could be hiding in a church tower, or a stray mine could be buried under the very flowers they were treading upon. They accepted the gratitude with smiles, but their eyes remained fixed on the road ahead. The bomb became a mobile symbol of freedom, its name whispered by locals as a sign that the liberators had finally arrived to stay. When the regiment reached the borders of Belgium and the Netherlands, they encountered a new, treacherous foe, the mud. It wasn't just dirt, it was a thick, clay-like sludge that could swallow a 30-ton tank to its belly. In the Scheldt, the roads were narrow dikes, and slipping off meant a slow, humiliating death in the marshes. One afternoon, the bomb felt its tracks lose their grip. The tank began to slide toward the edge of a steep embankment. Walter White fought the levers, the diesel engine screaming in protest as black smoke billowed from the exhausts. For a moment, it seemed the charm had run out. The tank was tilting at a 45-degree angle. But then the tracks bit into a buried stone wall from an old farmhouse. With a violent lurch, the bomb pulled itself back onto the solid road. The crew sat gasping for air, the smell of burnt clutch filling the cabin. The swamp had tried to claim them, but the bomb refused to sink. The bomb didn't fight alone, but it often felt like it was the only constant in a sea of change. The Sherbrooke Fusiliers were losing men and machines at a staggering rate. New replacements arrived, young boys with fresh uniforms and terrified eyes. The veterans of the bomb looked at them with a mix of pity and grim resolve. They tried to pass on their secrets. Never stay in one place for more than 30 seconds. Always check the tree line twice. Listen to the sound of the engine. They became the mentors of the regiment, the old guard that had survived the beaches and the bocage. Other crews started parking their tanks near the bomb during bivouacs, hoping that some of its legendary luck would rub off on them. It was a superstitious brotherhood, forged in the fire of a war that seemed to have no end, with the bomb acting as the unwavering lighthouse in a storm of iron. Maintaining a tank in the middle of a continental war was a feat of engineering madness. The bomb required hundreds of gallons of fuel and constant mechanical attention. During the rapid pursuit across France, supply lines were stretched to the breaking point. The crew became master scavengers. They learned how to liberate fuel from abandoned German depots and how to repair a thrown track in the middle of a thunderstorm using only a crowbar and sheer willpower. They kept a stash of spare parts hidden in every available crevice of the tank. Extra fan belts, spark plugs, and even a hidden box of unauthorized rations. They knew that a mechanical breakdown was just as deadly as a Panzer shell. If the bomb stopped moving, it became a target. Their survival wasn't just luck, it was the result of a relentless, obsessive refusal to let their machine fail them. Visibility is the tank's greatest ally and its most terrifying enemy. In the early mornings of the Dutch frontier, a thick, milky fog would roll over the polders, reducing the world to a 10-foot circle of gray. The crew of the bomb sat in an eerie silence, engines idling at the lowest possible RPM to avoid detection. Suddenly, the unmistakable clatter of heavy steel tracks echoed through the mist. It wasn't the light tap of a Sherman, it was the rhythmic, heavy thud of a German Panther. Bill Sherrick, the gunner, gripped his controls until his knuckles turned white. They couldn't see the predator, but they could smell its exhaust. For 10 agonizing minutes, the two steel beasts moved parallel to each other, separated only by a thin line of trees and a curtain of fog. The bomb held its breath. The Panther passed by, unaware that the luckiest tank in the Allied army was just yards away. It was a victory of patience over firepower. Every Sherman crew lived in the shadow of the Tiger phobia. One Tiger tank was rumored to be worth 10 Shermans. In a skirmish near a bombed-out rail yard, the bomb finally saw the nightmare made flesh. A Tiger I, its massive 88mm gun looking like a telephone pole, emerged from behind a shattered warehouse. The bomb's 75mm gun was almost useless against the Tiger's front armor. Sergeant Futter didn't panic. He knew that their only chance was speed and the bomb's uncanny agility. "Reverse! Hard right!" he screamed over the intercom. Walter White slammed the levers, and the bomb spun on its tracks, kicking up a cloud of soot and debris. A shell from the Tiger whistled through the space where their turret had been a second before. They retreated into the smoke, playing a deadly game of hide and seek, leading the Tiger toward a waiting battery of Allied anti-tank guns. Luck, they realized, was often just a byproduct of split-second timing. Being the lucky tank in the regiment started to take a strange psychological toll on the 5 men. They began to feel a sense of survivor's guilt. Every evening they would return to the bivouac and see empty spaces where their friends' tanks had parked the night before. They watched replacement crews arrive, only to disappear in the next day's engagement. The men of the bomb became increasingly superstitious. They wouldn't change their socks, they carried specific lucky charms in their pockets, and they spoke to the tank in hushed, respectful tones. They felt as if they were walking on a tightrope over an abyss, and any break in their routine might shatter the invisible shield around them. The bomb was no longer just a machine. It was their sanctuary, their home, and their only friend in a world that wanted to burn them alive. Entering a hostile German city was like sticking your head into a hornet's nest. In Deventer, the bomb faced a gauntlet of Panzerfaust teams, infantry armed with disposable one-shot anti-tank rockets. These weapons could be fired from any basement window or rooftop. To counter this, the crew developed a 360-degree defense. Futter and the loader kept their hatches cracked open, scanning the upper floors with submachine guns, while White kept the tank moving in a jagged, unpredictable pattern. At one intersection, a rocket streaked down from a balcony, grazing the bomb's sandbag armor before exploding against the stone wall. The blast shook the crew, but the bomb didn't stop. They returned fire with a mixture of high-explosive shells and Browning machine gun bursts, clearing the street block by block. The city was a graveyard of steel, but the bomb refused to be its next tenant. By the time the bomb reached the Rhine, it had consumed thousands of gallons of fuel and fired more rounds than its designers ever intended. The mechanical strain was immense. The rubber on the track pads was worn down to the steel, and the engine's roar had taken on a slightly ragged edge. During a rare 3-day lull in the fighting, the crew performed a miracle overhaul. They worked 36 hours straight, replacing the worn tracks with scavenged parts and cleaning every fuel injector by hand. They were exhausted, their skins stained black with oil and grease, but they refused to hand the tank over to the regimental mechanics. They didn't trust anyone else to touch their charmed lady. This bond between man and machine was the secret ingredient to their luck. They took care of the bomb, and in return, the bomb took care of them. March 1945. The Rhine River stood as the last great moat of the Nazi fortress. It was a massive, fast-flowing barrier guarded by the remnants of the German army's most fanatical units. For the crew of the bomb, crossing the Rhine wasn't just a tactical maneuver, it was a plunge into the unknown. The tank was loaded onto a specialized raft, bobbing precariously in the churning gray water. As they floated toward the eastern bank, they were completely exposed. German artillery shells erupted in the river, sending geysers of frigid water onto the bomb's hot engine deck. The crew sat inside, hatches buttoned down, feeling every vibration of the explosions through the hull. They were passengers in a game of Russian roulette. If a shell hit the raft, the bomb would sink like a stone, taking its legend to the bottom of the Rhine.
But as the raft hit the mud of the far shore, the tracks bit in, and the bomb roared back to life, the first of its regiment to taste German soil. As the bomb pushed deeper into the German heartland, the nature of the enemy changed. They were no longer just fighting elite panzers. They were facing the Volkssturm, old men and young boys armed with the deadly Panzerfaust. These soldiers had nothing left to lose. In the narrow, timber-framed streets of Westphalian villages, every cellar was a potential ambush point. One evening, as the bomb cleared a path through a smoldering hamlet, a 14-year-old boy stepped out from behind a hay cart, aiming a rocket directly at the bomb's side. The loader, looking through his periscope, froze for a split second, but the rocket didn't fire. The primitive trigger mechanism jammed at the crucial moment. Before the boy could try again, Walter White swung the tank, the massive steel fender mocking the cart aside and forcing the insurgent to flee. It was a haunting reminder that in this war, even the luckiest tank was only one mechanical failure away from a tragic end. In the grueling weeks of the spring offensive, the bomb became more than a weapon. It was a mobile kitchen and a furnace. The twin diesel engines generated a massive amount of heat, and the crew learned to use it to their advantage. They would strap tins of M-ration stew or captured German sausages to the exhaust manifold. By the time they reached their objective, they had a hot meal waiting for them, a luxury few infantrymen could dream of. They shared these meager feasts inside the cramped turret, the smell of grease and diesel mixing with the aroma of heated meat. These small moments of domesticity kept them sane. They joked about opening a restaurant in Montreal called the Sizzling Sherman after the war. For a few minutes, the roar of the guns was replaced by the clink of metal spoons against tin cans, a fragile bubble of humanity inside a 30-ton shell of armor. By April 1945, rumors of a ghost tank began to spread among the retreating German units. They spoke of a Sherman with a strange name painted on its side, a tank that walked through minefields unharmed and seemed to anticipate every ambush. The bomb had developed a signature style of movement, aggressive, fast, and deceptively clever. Sergeant Futter had learned to read the body language of the battlefield. He could sense where a hidden anti-tank gun was positioned by the way the birds flew or the way the dust settled on a road. During the battle for a strategic bridgehead, the bomb drove straight through a screen of smoke and debris, emerging like a phantom behind a German defensive line. The shock was so great that the German gunners abandoned their positions without firing a single shot. The bomb's reputation was now doing as much work as its 75mm cannon.
Despite their luck, the physical and mental exhaustion was reaching a breaking point. The crew had been in combat for over 10 months without a significant break. Their skin was sallow, their eyes were sunken, and their hearing was permanently damaged by the constant roar of the engines and the blast of the gun. The bomb itself was showing signs of combat fatigue. The electrical system flickered, the turret traverse creaked with the grit of a dozen different countries, and the tracks were worn so thin they looked like ribbons. Yet, every morning, when the order came to move out, the bomb would cough into life on the first try. It was as if the machine and the men were bound by a silent pact. Don't you quit on me, and I won't quit on you. They were the marathon runners of the Armored Corps, pushing toward a finish line that still seemed miles away. As the bomb rolled deeper into the German heartland, the crew encountered a horror that no amount of combat training could prepare them for. Near a small forest outside a nameless village, they stumbled upon a sub-camp of the Nazi concentration camp system. The bomb ground to a halt as the crew looked out through their periscopes at walking skeletons in striped uniforms. For the first time, the war wasn't about luck or tank duels. It was about the fundamental struggle between good and evil. The hardened veterans who had seen their friends blown to pieces in Normandy wept openly inside the turret. They used the bomb's external storage to hand out every scrap of food they had, biscuits, chocolate, even their precious cigarettes. The bomb stood as a silent, steel witness to the crimes of the dying regime, its presence providing a shield for those who had forgotten what it felt like to be protected. The final weeks of the war in Germany were a nightmare of urban sniping. Every attic window was a potential death trap. In the city of Zutphen, the bomb was tasked with supporting infantry clearing a row of industrial warehouses. As the tank moved through a narrow alley, a German sniper fired a high-velocity round that shattered the glass of Bill Sherrick's periscope. Glass shards sprayed into the turret, narrowly missing the gunner's eyes. It was a terrifying reminder that even without piercing the armor, the enemy could still reach inside. The crew didn't retreat. They used the bomb's 75mm gun to collapse the entire corner of the building where the shot originated. They were fighting with a new kind of cold fury. The charm of the tank was being tested by thousands of small, lethal pinpricks, but the steel hull of the M4A2 remained unyielding.
Rumors reached the Sherbrooke Fusiliers that a remnant of the elite Panzer Lehr division was operating in their sector. These were the masters of armored warfare, men who had survived since the Eastern Front. In a misty valley near the Weser River, the bomb caught a glimpse of a Panther tank through a gap in the trees. It was camouflaged so perfectly it looked like part of the forest. Sergeant Futter knew a direct frontal engagement was suicide. He whispered a command to Walter White, and the bomb performed a risky flanking maneuver through a boggy streambed, territory no sane tank commander would enter. The bomb groaned, its tracks submerged in freezing water, but it clawed its way up the opposite bank, emerging behind the Panther. One shot to the thin rear armor, and the German giant was silenced. It wasn't just luck, it was the bomb's ability to do the impossible. By April, the Allied supply lines were stretched to the breaking point. The bomb was running on fumes. During a critical advance, the engine began to sputter and cough, the first sign of mechanical weakness in months. They were in the middle of a no-man's land with no support. If the engine died, they were sitting ducks. The crew had to get creative. They spent the night siphoning diesel from abandoned German trucks and even a crashed Luftwaffe plane they found in a field. They filtered the tainted fuel through layers of silk parachutes to remove the grit. When they turned the ignition, the bomb roared with a smoky, angry protest, but it moved. It was a dirty, desperate kind of survival, but it proved that the bond between the men and their machine was stronger than any logistics manual. The last major obstacle before the surrender was a small, ancient stone bridge over a canal in northern Germany. The Germans had wired it with enough explosives to level a city block. Baum was ordered to lead the charge to seize it before it could be blown. It was a race against a ticking clock. As the bomb roared toward the bridge, German machine gun fire sparked off the turret like hundreds of fireflies. A German officer reached for the detonator, but a well-placed burst from the bomb's Browning .30 caliber machine gun stopped him just in time. The tank crossed the bridge at full speed, the vibrations of its 30 tons nearly collapsing the ancient stones. As the last Allied vehicle crossed, the bridge held. The bomb had saved the advance, and in doing so, it had once again defied the odds that said it should have been blown to scrap.